Dear viewers from home and abroad, welcome to a special episode of Tritiyo Matra. To follow our conversation and engage with our community live as this show airs, feel free to find us on YouTube, Facebook and X handle. Tonight I am joined by two distinguished guests. To my left, John F. Danilowicz, a former diplomat, former U.S. Deputy Chief of Mission to Bangladesh, editor-at-large of South Asia Perspectives and Executive Director of Right to Freedom. To my right, Mr. Abul Hasan Chowdhury, who served as Bangladesh State Minister of Foreign Affairs, former Member of Parliament, is also with us. We also will discuss democracy and human rights in U.S.-Bangladesh relations, how the geopolitical landscapes evolves, and Bangladesh's role in the Pacific strategy. It's a lot to cover, but we'll break it down quickly and explore what these issues for Bangladesh and beyond. John, you have been working with close ties to Bangladesh and its people for a very long time. Some might say you know Bangladesh better than some Bangladeshis do. What made you care so much about Bangladesh and its people, and why did you decide so much time and effort to promoting human rights here in Bangladesh?
So I owe a great debt, a personal debt and a professional debt to Bangladesh and all of the friends I've made along the way. I came to Bangladesh as a young man. I was 22 years old in 1990. I came and I was just a few years older than Bangladesh was. I returned later in 2007 and spent 4 wonderful years, and then finished my tour a few years later as the Deputy Chief of Mission. So my interaction with Bangladesh spanned a 30-plus year period. And along the way, my family grew. My oldest son was born during my first posting. My older children all came here and went to school and graduated. So there's deep personal and professional ties. During the time that I was a U.S. diplomat, obviously my role was to understand Bangladesh, to communicate that to Washington, to help people in Bangladesh understand United States policy. And of course, when I spoke and when I talked, what I did was try my best to represent the policy of the administration at the time. So after a 32-year career, a wonderful career that took us around the world, I retired from the Foreign Service and prepared to have a quiet life. And then my friend and mentor and 3 times boss, Ambassador William Milam, called me and said that he had founded a small organization in Washington, a non-profit focusing on human rights and democracy with a special interest in Bangladesh. So he asked me to join. I was honored to do so. And over the subsequent years, I found that there was a relative freedom in being able to speak one's own mind, to reflect the principles that I hold dear. And our organization, which I'm sure we'll talk about, Right to Freedom, focused on how to advance freedom. And as a citizen of Massachusetts, the cradle of liberty, the home of freedom in the United States, it was a good fit for me.
You visited Bangladesh after a while, and how does it feel walking around in this new Bangladesh? Some people say it's a new Bangladesh, and you also made plans to visit the grave of Mr. Nur-e-Alam Siddique today, an iconic figure in Bangladesh's history tied to our liberation war and our struggle for democracy. What made you focus on paying particular respect to him during your visit?
Sure. Well, first of all, my return to Bangladesh, I consider a homecoming. And I confess it's been quite emotional for me. I didn't anticipate how much I would be affected returning to Bangladesh, meeting old friends, feeling the loss of friends who are no longer with us, chief among those, our friend Nur-e-Alam Siddique. And to see what Bangladesh was like. I didn't arrive immediately after the fall of the previous government. So in a sense, I may have missed the revolutionary feel of those early days. But still, to come to Bangladesh in this environment, to feel a sense of optimism and hope for the future, leavened by the reality that past dreams have not always been fulfilled. I had been in the United States and working on Bangladesh, but I certainly had the impression that I was not welcome to return to Bangladesh before the 5th of August. I never bothered to apply for a visa because I was fairly certain the application would be lost. The visa wouldn't have been issued. I'm sure my friends would have been happy to see me, but I imagined I would be talking to him in a climate of fear and not knowing who was looking over our shoulder, who would be getting a knock at the door. So of course I wouldn't want to put my friends in jeopardy. I saw them as they came from time to the United States. If they took a trip out of the country, they would make a furtive phone call saying, I can't call you from Dhaka, but now that I'm in Singapore, I can call to say hello. So returning to Bangladesh after the end of the previous regime at this time of hope was something which was a great opportunity for me. With regard to Nurialam Siddique, I had a meeting in Washington several months back with one of the leaders of the student movement. And I told him I was honored to sit with him, and I admired his sacrifice. And I recalled Nurialam Siddique, one of the four caliphs. And I had heard multiple stories from him and others of his generation about the liberation war. And I knew the hope and optimism with which they approached the future. And he told me stories as a young man about situation in Bangladesh, his early visits to the United States. And he was a great friend for me over the entire course of my career and my time in Bangladesh. I spent countless hours at his table. He had a standing rule that once per month I must go to his house for a meal. And of course the table would be full with dishes, and he would carefully select each dish to ensure that my wife and I had tried some of everything. He taught me a lot about Bangladesh, its history, his love for this country. He taught me a lot about how Bangladesh had transformed in the economic sphere, and whether it be the garments industry or in other areas. I watched his family grow as I watched my family grow, and it's with great pride that I see the role that his sons have now taken and how they honor their father's memory. So it's a deep personal relationship, but in some ways it encapsulates my experience with Bangladesh. Because of my advocacy for democracy and human rights, critics will be very quick to put me in a category. So I'll be labeled as pro one party or pro another. The assumption being that if I stand for something, it must be that I'm doing so on someone else's behalf. But again, our friend Nurialam Siddique taught me the importance of principles and standing with your principles. I, again, was particularly criticized by the previous regime, which somehow thought that my issue was with their party. And what I tried to remind them is that their party had a great legacy. Yeah. And that legacy had been squandered. And I have hope, maybe against hope, that someday in the future that party will redeem itself, that there'll be remorse, there'll be reform, they will replace leaders, and they will rebuild.
Thank you. I'll come back to you again. Mr. Chowdhury, you were familiar with Mr. Siddique and his historic contributions to Bangladesh. Perhaps you can share your thoughts on his legacy and Bangladesh's democratic journey so far.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Ramzan Kareem, Ramzan Mubarak. May I start off by saying that we have known each other for a very long time, and you know that normally during Ramadan I tend not to take any social commitments in the evening, but this is a different occasion. I really value my friendship with Mr. John Danilowicz. Not that he is just a friend of mine, he is a friend of many people in Bangladesh. Yeah. And when he came to serve in an official capacity, he wanted to learn more about the country, wanted to be a part of us. And also, as I joined your iconic discussion meeting, we were a minute ago just discussing when we were waiting for this meeting to start, of the classic personality which in many respects my elder brother Mr. Nurialam Siddique was, one of the founders of Bangladesh, a very, very close lieutenant of Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. He wanted in his last years, and both of us have cried on the day he went away, that he didn't live to see many of the thoughts that he had brought to the table, his admonitions, his rebukes, his requests, his pleadings, how Bangladesh should turn around, and may Allah grant him Jannat, eternal bliss. I am sure that from there he is satisfied that a resurgent Bangladesh is trying to work back and redeem the pledge for democracy, which has been earned at a very, very huge cost. because the perception here and very much the reality was that the usurpation of power had taken place. People had lost their freedom, and I think that under a very respected personality, internationally famed Professor Yunus, there is a long way to go, but we bring in the ethos of an inclusive development, as John was saying, that you should not see everything on a partisan spirit.
Right.
You know, these great leaders like Mr. Nur Alam Siddique, when he came to speak on various issues, one could be sure of one thing, that whatever may have been his party affiliation in his young days, and for a good part of his very active, glittering, if I may say, political life, he talked about the country and the benefits, both political and economic. I, as a citizen, would like to see political stability. Any transitional arrangement is not a permanent arrangement, but then there remains many things that a transitional government would do, and it is our hope that they will address the economic issues. People are taken in by slogans only for a certain amount of time, but then they would like to see how the government addresses the issue of prices. That is very, very direct, particularly as we talk on the month of Ramadan. They would also like to see how we craft a policy to our benefit in the region and outside the region. We recognize that there are some very important players we have to deal with, our immediate neighbor too, but then our relationship on the matter of transit, on the matter of commerce, on the matter of trade should be transactional. We are a mighty nation. It's a nation of 170 million.
Maybe more than that.
We are grateful for the tremendous support we received from all parts of the world, even in the United States of America. The corporate world, the media, the world of arts and music gave tremendous support to the Bangladesh. Of course, the support we received from India was not just magnificent. We have no hesitation to acknowledge that it was unique. But then to see in the day and age, since we are talking to a premier, it's a media house, that a segment, not all, a segment of the Indian media has made it their business to tell us that they gave us independence. Nothing absolutely will be farthest from the truth. In a total spirit of friendship, I would like to remind them that yes, we earned our independence at a huge cost. The Mukti Jodhas, the freedom fighters fought, 3 million lives were lost, we know that. But it was also cured one of their perennial concerns, a security concern that they always lived with, that is their Eastern Front. So, I think that not much acknowledgement is done to that, and we are quite sufficiently capable of sorting out our own problems, or we are on the way. And this is where I will end by saying that tested friends, Bangla jetake bola hoy porikkhito bondhu, John Danilowicz shomoy, jini he had, I have no hesitation to tell you, he was ready to sacrifice the ultimate objective of a diplomatic career for his beliefs, for what he thought. I mean, for me,
actually,
it is a reminder of another Archer blood.
Yeah.
And also accompanying
he sacrificed
him, accompanying him is also another great friend of Bangladesh. I wish to also offer my warm greetings and welcome to him, Ambassador Bill Milam, and I think the course of the next few days, this will be exchange on the basis of friendship. You know, in doing that, we do not always have to agree, but we know that there is a sincerity of purpose.
Thank you. John, as Mr. Chowdhury was saying, Bangladesh is going through a democratic transition with the interim government led by Professor Muhammad Yunus. We are seeing an approach with multiple reform commissions being created, who have submitted their recommendations for necessary reforms, while a new commission is now working with all major political parties to come to a consensus on how these suggested reforms will be implemented. I'm sure you have been following the ongoing uprising in Bangladesh, and you are also part of that. Right. And you have extensive knowledge of the challenges that Bangladesh democracy has faced in the last few years. What are your thoughts on the progress of democratization so far?
Obviously, it's a long process, and it won't be continued during the tenure of this government, and it probably won't be finished in the tenure of the next government. It took 16, 17 long years to get to this point. From the last restart, reset in 2008, 2009. I had the opportunity to speak with Professor Yunus today. We've had the opportunity to speak with several of the reform commissions. Over the next few days, we'll be meeting with people across the political spectrum. Overall, I still sense a feeling of optimism. That doesn't mean that all of the problems have been solved. It doesn't mean there are no disagreements. But I think the path forward is clear. Nobody except the direct beneficiaries of the past regime want to turn the clock back. Everyone is looking forward. And I've been open that my sympathies are with the students, those who were the vanguard of this change. And when talking again of 1971, I see a direct line between 1971 and 2024. And to see, again, not to be partisan, but to see what the Bangladesh Students' League became in 2024 compared to what it was and the glorious role that it played in the history of this country, it's a dishonor to all those who sacrificed, frankly. So while we need to know what has happened in the past, we need to look forward. So Professor Yunus and his team have a goal of getting to free and fair elections, handing over to an elected government. They're seeking to build consensus on reforms, which I think is the right approach. We've heard the other parties talk about reform. Presumably they will all sign on to a national charter of agreement on reform, but the proof is in the pudding. Whether the parties can be trusted with this responsibility remains to be seen. Our organization, Right to Freedom, stands for principles, and those principles remain regardless of who's in power. After August 5th, I said Bangladesh had been given a second chance, but upon reflection, this is actually at least a fourth chance. There was a chance in 1971, which ultimately was squandered. There was another chance following 1990, and again following 2007. So I hope, perhaps against hope, that this time Bangladesh will take advantage of this opportunity, and the people of this wonderful country will finally have the government that they deserve.
Mr. Chowdhury, what's your take on
Well,
this?
very clearly, reforms are necessary, and one of the underlying thought behind the upsurge was that things needed to be changed. But this is a continuous process. The more permanent and lasting reforms must carry the will of the people, their understanding and their support. And I would expect that the transitional government would understand, and by and large probably they do, that there should be people oriented reform and keeping their ears close to the ground, whether the consensus that has to be brought about with the consent of the people, how quickly they can devise that is, of course, I think paramount in the larger context of the thing. So I would say that internally the government has to address economic issues. Investors will only come when there is stability and there is predictability. In an unpredictable situation, no matter how rosy the picture may be, it would be very difficult to induce them to come. And equally on the international front, we would like to build a firm base of friendship, which should be, as I had mentioned earlier, transactional, whether it be in matters of trade or finance. And the same should go not just with your immediate neighbor, but with China, with the United States. But at the same time, we are an independent nation. We cannot be considered a junior partner by anyone. And if any country does that, I think there should be an united voice against it. Whatever may be our differences, and differences in a democratic polity, there it will continue to exist. But on certain matters, there should be unity, which is democracy, pluralism, social justice, and a cohesive nature. And the other thing is that we are not interested, nor have we by and large ever been, to be in the race, to be in a scramble. At the same time, we have to define our priorities, keeping our interest aloft. And I think that we will be able to, through friendship, through diplomacy, through persuasion, get a greater access and continue with the facilities that that we do, because the ready-made garment sector is one of the major earners, if not the biggest earner for Bangladesh. And of course, there are the remittances which our people from different parts of the world through very hard work are sending to the country. These two pillars not just needs to be protected, but we have to enhance the basket. To do all of that, you need a period, a climate of stability with a political will, which will be different arguments will take place, but it can even be at times confrontational, but not that on a permanent basis, because that would eat away into the fabric of our society. And the youth have to be educated, and they are showing marvelous results wherever they are going, but this should continue, because they should be their educational aspect should be taken very seriously by the present government and the governments who come to replace the transitional arrangement in the future. So, in short, I would say that we have had tremendous friends, but both home and abroad, and in this continuous restructuring of the Bangladesh into a greater ideal, their support will continue.
John, the United States, particularly under the Biden presidency, emphasized democracy, human rights in its foreign policy. In your view, has Washington's focus on democracy and human rights influenced its engagement with the Bangladesh government and people, and in what ways?
Sure. Well, a country's foreign policy will always reflect the values of its people, ultimately. A government might have different priorities, but fundamentally the United States stands for freedom, liberty, respect for rights. Now, there are often different strategies about how to go about pursuing these. For the Biden administration, the values agenda was clearly front and center. And we saw that manifest itself in the relationship with Bangladesh. Not that that was the sole issue, but it was certainly an important one. And the United States was fortunate to be represented by one of our best diplomats, Ambassador Peter Haas, for whom I have the utmost respect. Ambassador Haas had a very difficult time.
Yeah.
He faced a lot of obstacles, but he had a North Star. He was here to advance the interests of the United States, to represent the people of the United States to the people of Bangladesh. There were times of friction. He was treated unfairly, in my view, but a consummate professional, he pursued the objectives. I was at times critical of the approach that my government took, but ultimately the test, I think, of the Biden administration was once the change came in August, almost immediately the United States recognized this opportunity and embraced the change, embraced the July uprising, the July revolution, and worked with the interim government to support the reform agenda. So I think at a critical moment, particularly when Professor Yunus represented Bangladesh at the United Nations, with a hero's welcome that he received, the respect and admiration of the world, President Biden and senior members of the administration were there to signal that the people of the United States stood with the people of Bangladesh at this critical time. So I have the utmost respect for that.
Mr. Abul Chowdhury, based on your diplomatic experience, how does Bangladesh perceive the U.S. advocacy for democracy and human rights within the bilateral relationship? Do Bangladesh leaders see these emphases as constructive support or under pressure, and how has it historically affected cooperation between the two countries?
Well, if we start from the startings of the democratic process, we can even relate to 71, that was also a struggle to emancipate ourselves from a dictatorial rule and transit into a democratic framework. And very largely, whatever may have been the outlook of the US administration of the day, as I have mentioned earlier, a very large portion of the American people in general and collectively and various sectors supported us because of the pronounced commitment to democracy. And I think similar will be the case, because in this global order we have seen that undemocratic countries do not have a long shelf life, and nor should they. And the people, the biggest and the most important thing, the people of our country desperately and keenly want to live under a democratic dispensation. They do not want to barter away their freedom for anything else. Whatever picture of economic growth you may throw in front of them, they would not give that away for their right to be an independent people. So, I think this is by and large understood, and we have made it quite clear that regardless of the administration, because we are not in any sort of military alliance. Our alliance should be for peace and the culture of peace and economic development, and for that, in whatever way it is possible, we shall do our bit. And Bangladesh is not a small country, it's a huge country, it's a country of 180 million. And we have proved once again that we are perhaps one of the most resilient people. Time and again, to give one example, when Holy Artisan happened, that was also during Ramadan.
Indeed.
I was returning thinking, oh my God, will this good work, all that has been taken, go awry? No, it didn't. We pulled ourselves up. So I think, you have absolutely pointed out to a very important point that we are the governments of the world, and be it China, United States of America, in the region, Pakistan, India, should know that people of Bangladesh seek friendship on a basis of sovereign equality, and any minimizing of that, even in perception, will not be something that will be acceptable to us. At the same time, there is no aggression here. We do not seek aggrandizement. Only aggrandizement we seek is of friendship.
John, you worked during the previous regime under the Right to Freedom organization, as you were saying, was instrumental in shaping discourse regarding Bangladesh's dire situation and providing the narrative threats that the youth of Bangladesh grasped during the mass uprising that uprooted an autocratic government. From your perspective, what tangible impact have initiatives such as Right to Freedom had on Bangladesh's democratic landscape so far?
Sure. So as we watched events unfold in Bangladesh during the final years of the previous government, we recognized that one of the primary challenges was the closing space for fundamental freedoms, freedom of association, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and that debate and discussion in Bangladesh was stifled. Now, there were courageous people like yourself who continued to speak out, but many were inhibited from doing so, and many suffered for that. So we thought we could provide assistance by providing a platform for people to continue to have these conversations. And we were fortunate that many friends and warriors for democracy and human rights collaborated with us. They came to Washington and they participated in programs. People like Shahidul Alam, for example. We hosted events involving people like former Chief Justice Sinha, people who themselves had been victims of the previous regime. We gave them some space, and we introduced them to audiences in the United States who didn't understand fully the situation here in Bangladesh.
Yep.
And then over time we realized that other voices were being stifled, and we could take advantage of technology. Again, during the COVID pandemic, one silver lining was that we found that distance didn't need to necessarily keep us from communicating with each other. We all learned the various tools and programs and platforms to have video conferencing. So we arranged a number of webinars in which we brought together people from Bangladesh and elsewhere to speak about these issues, even from India. Again, we're not a partisan organization. The more voices that there can be, the better. And then we supplemented this with our writing individually and collectively to share this. And a whole new world of social media activism opened up as well. So what we wanted to do was to help publicize what was happening. We're not a lobbying organization. We didn't lobby the U.S. government. We represented no interests in Bangladesh. We were not representing any political party or movement. We were standing for these principles. And now as Bangladesh enters a new phase, those of us who've worked together are looking for new ways to work. And one thing I would like to call out is the important contribution of the Bangladeshi diaspora, the community in the United States. It was remarkable to see, particularly during the long July, how Bangladeshi Americans, proud to be Americans, yet proud to be from Bangladesh, wanted to do something. They wanted to help. So they also spoke out. They expressed solidarity. Everyone turned their Facebook profiles red. They engaged in chat rooms. They wrote to their representatives. They did whatever they could. They contributed to funds to help those who were injured during the violence. So again, we were a small part of a much bigger scene. I say time and again that the revolution was born and raised and came to fruition here in Bangladesh. The Bangladeshi people deserve 100% of the credit for the end of the previous regime and this opportunity for democracy. Those of us on the outside watched, we helped as we could, but this fantasy that somehow the events of July and August were orchestrated or managed from abroad, is simply the delusions of those who won't face the reality that they have no one but themselves to blame for the fate which befell them.
John, Bangladesh's human rights situation is still imperfect. Do you think such initiatives will continue to be watchdogs for human rights and democracy in Bangladesh, or will there be a shift in priorities from the US during this presidency?
Right. So again, I think the human rights organizations outside of government, Human Rights Watch, the Robert F. Kennedy Foundation, Amnesty International, the Tom Lantos Human Rights Foundation, they'll continue to stand for these principles. As far as the administration goes, the Trump administration is still developing its specific policies toward the region or to Bangladesh. So we can't yet, I think, know exactly how U.S. policy towards Bangladesh will ultimately turn out. But we can see some outlines of the broad themes that President Trump and his administration are pursuing. I think in this regard, the most significant is the commitment to advancing in a free and open Indo-Pacific, and we'll perhaps talk more about that. But I believe that ultimately the success of Bangladesh and the success of consolidation of democracy and a prosperous Bangladesh will provide a powerful example through the Indo-Pacific region. And frankly, it will challenge an alternative model, which is being promoted by China, which sees that authoritarianism is the answer and thinks that people, when given the choice, will choose some illusory prosperity over their freedom. And I think Bangladesh shows that no matter how many bridges you build, no matter how many metro stations you open, if the people don't have their fundamental rights, they won't be satisfied.
As Mr. Chowdhury was saying. Yeah. Mr. Chowdhury, very briefly, we are almost at the end of the program. Considering the evolving great power dynamics in South Asia, how should Bangladesh navigate its relationship with major powers such as the United States, India, and China? What is Bangladesh's strategy to maintain a balanced foreign policy, ensuring its strategic interests and development needs are met without compromising its sovereignty or core values? Do you think Bangladesh can carve out a unique position for itself and amid the US-India partnership and China's regional influence?
I think we can, and your every word of your question is very important. I think we should faithfully,
very briefly, please.
faithfully represent not only what we have done in the past, what we hope to do in the future. And I would be failing in my duty if I do not make one point that sometimes the hardship that our good friend John has alluded to, and you had faced the brunt of it during those years, also is visited on the families. Tanzir Alam Siddique will tell you that because of his father's views, he too came under a lot of peril. Well, on your question, I think again I look to our friends like John, who I don't think needs to be prompted to tell his country and also the world that Bangladesh is intrinsically a peaceful country. It has no business to be otherwise, and that it has a huge population. It only wants to develop a spirit of collectiveness in this, and we also look forward to have a more regional approach. I think the defunct SARC, I am happy to see the steps are being taken to revitalize it. So that would also probably.
But India is not interested on that.
Well, we will have to work out through very strong, very committed diplomacy to turn that around and bring about a change in South Asia, which should be for peace. I mean, I just end with example because there is not much time. If we could get all together, then imagine 83,000 kilowatts of electricity we can get from the Nepal hydroelectric, which is now not being able to be utilized because of the conditions that you have alluded to. So, friends like John can convey this message that through peace we want to bring about a higher level of democracy, and at the same time also there are many economic hardships that we are going through, and we have overcome a lot. We have made tremendous developments, and we want to continue on that road, on that spirit.
John, finally, what's your outlook on the future of US-Bangladesh relations in the coming years, given our discussion on democracy, human rights, and geopolitical strategy? What key opportunities or challenges do you foresee refining the bilateral relationship moving forward? Additionally, what steps would you suggest both countries take to ensure a constructive, mutually respectful partnership that benefits the people of Bangladesh and the broader region?
Sure. No, I've written and thought about this issue a lot, obviously, since our election and since the Trump administration came to office. You know, I look back and chuckle a little bit about some of the predictions that others had made about how the world would change on January 20th when it came to U.S. and Bangladesh relations. There's been probably more continuity than change thus far as the Trump administration settles in. President Trump has been very clear about his priorities. He's pursuing a policy of America first, and he's doing so not solely because that's his view, but that's the view that the majority of the voters in the United States wanted him to pursue. So ultimately, any government is accountable to its people in a democracy. But I don't think pursuing American interests necessarily means that it's a zero-sum game, because I would argue that any government of Bangladesh should have a Bangladesh first policy, even if it's not called that. Trade is a great example. The rise of the Bangladesh garment industry, for example, and again, our friend Siddique was the first to invite me to visit a garment factory. And his vision for how that industry would not only grow, but how it would create prosperity and provide opportunities for workers, and would also serve as a way of further developing the relationship between the United States, that has continued to grow. So obviously it's to the benefit of Bangladesh, but it's also to the benefit of the U.S., to the U.S. consumer, who has access to quality garments at affordable prices. There are opportunities going forward, perhaps, to have Bangladesh source more cotton from the United States, which would help the trade deficit from the U.S. perspective, would also, as global trade trends change, perhaps even help Bangladesh in terms of its competitiveness. So my sense is that the governments of Bangladesh and the governments in the United States can work together to find areas in which we work together. I served in our embassy in Juba, South Sudan, and there the contingent of Bangladeshi peacekeepers served with distinction. The deputy force commander was a major general from Bangladesh. And we had many conversations about how our countries work together around the world in global peacekeeping operations. This type of cooperation will certainly continue. There may be areas in which there's friction, but I think there'll be more that we agree upon than we disagree. The final thing I would say is, again, something I've repeated many times, that the relationship between two countries is far more than the relationship between two governments. It's the relationships between peoples. And the many exchange programs that the United States has made lifetime friends. Again, Siddique spoke often about his visit to the United States soon after independence as an international visitor. In fact, I remember him saying that, as a very proud man representing a very proud country, he was a bit cautious about the perception that the United States was trying to wine and dine him. So he refused to take the money that the United States offered him for his food, and yet he brought his own along. So I think the relationship between the United States and Bangladesh will continue to grow, enriched by the contributions of the many members of the Bangladeshi community, many of whom I know are loyal viewers of your show. So to all of them in the United States watching this, I thank you for your contribution in building the relationship.
Thank you, John. Thank you.
I echo that view of yours.
Thank you.
I'm absolutely optimistic that will be the case. Thank you.
Dear viewers, that brings us to the end of today's discussion. We have covered democracy, human rights, U.S.-Bangladesh relations, and the Bangladesh's place in the evolving Indo-Pacific strategy. Thanks to John F. Danilowicz and Mr. Abul Hasan Chowdhury for sharing their thoughts. The conversation on these issues is far from over, and we will continue to bring you the perspective that mattered. Thanks for watching Tritiyo Matra. Follow us on all our social media. Until next time, take care and stay safe.